Surviving the Toxic Cult of IQ. Brought to you by Newton John. When I was a kid, my mom got me to do an IQ test from a magazine. This showed that my IQ was 172. That is ridicule. My IQ is not 172. This was Woman's Day or some such thing, and no doubt the test was intended to guarantee that no parent would walk away without a gifted child. It's just that when a very intelligent child did it, they ended up as a certified Einstein. My mother got very excited by this, and at some point after this, told me gravely, "You are what some people call a genius." Thanks, Moom. That certainly won't cripple me forever. Sometime later, she must have thought better of this. Maybe I'd done something stupendously dumb, and decided to tell me in the car one day, "You're not a genius." You know, like I'd started that whole thing. It was all very confusing. She knew Sornatai was the anointed one among me and my two brothers. I could read at 3. Made oracular philosophical remarks around the same age about how we knew whether waking life was a dream or not, and generally freaked people out. And as I've written about before, my great-grandfather was Max Born, a close friend of Einstein who won the Nobel Prize for Physics. So there was that. No pressure, as they say. My older brother resented and hero-worshipped me in equal measure, and held on to the idea that one day I'd win my own Nobel Prize for far too long for comfort. He even brought it up in his speech at my 40th birthday, which was not at all cringe. In primary school, they didn't know what to do with me. So they let me do weird projects on the side, like experiments to measure the psychic power of plants. This was the 70s, and there was a popular book on this subject on the bookshelf at home. At high school, they channeled me into gifted programs, where I got to do cool things like making my own digital adding machine. When I was 13, I wrote a 10,000-word thesis on war. Around the same time, my maths teacher showed the class the magic properties of the number 9. I figured this had to be to do with its being the last number before 10 in the base 10 system. So I proved these same magic properties occurred for the number 5 in base 6, 7 in base 8, and so on. When I proudly presented these findings to my teacher, A was spiced A. That was my first lesson in people not always appreciating smartasses. None of these minor feats makes me a prodigy, of course. Compare this to the kids who can recite the periodic table at 3, or who complete university degrees at 12. The thing is, though, that if you are in the top 1%, you will rarely come across people smarter than yourself until you are an adult and in a high IQ profession. By this time, you will already have cemented an identity around being the smartest person in the room, which will be very hard to shake. And that will be poisonous for your well-being in all kinds of ways. It's uncomfortable writing about this, not because it's emotionally painful. I'm old enough to have outgrown the damage that inflated intellectual expectations did to me. But because of the toxic overvaluing of IQ in our culture, it's just hard to talk about one's own intelligence without coming off as a dick. It's different from other gifts one might comfortably talk about. In the toxic culture that has developed around IQ, to have a high IQ is not just like having, say, artistic ability. It's almost seen as a proxy for human worth. Look, let's be real. IQ is not just a test of how good you are at IQ tests, as some critics like to say, as if it meant nothing at all. IQ correlates with academic and professional performance. It is a meaningful, predictive test, but it means something similar to what athletic giftedness means. Your body in the IQ case. Your brain performs better at certain tasks than most people's. You think faster. You have better memory. You can keep more mental balls in the air at the same time. It's almost as mechanical as that. It certainly doesn't have anything to do with wisdom or judgment. Super smart people can be extremely dumb in this respect. I have known many highly intelligent people in my work as a software engineer. Some I have no doubt would have higher IQ scores than me. They can solve algorithmic challenges and grasp complex technical architectures faster than me. Yet their intelligence does not correlate at all with emotional or interpersonal intelligence, with holistic insight or creativity. It often does not even seem to correlate with the ability to communicate ideas, even if the person's problem-solving ability is exceptional. Cognitive giftedness is extremely multidimensional, and IQ is far too blunt an instrument to capture this complexity. When I was 18, I worked in a retail computer store. I was an absolutely terrible salesman. The whole ethos of sales was just completely misaligned with my personality. On the other hand, I worked with a guy who was a complete gun. He had a charisma, confidence, ease, and charm that won customers' confidence and opened their wallets. He was nowhere near as smart as me, but he was extremely gifted in what he did, and I would call this a kind of intelligence, even if not of the conventionally recognized kind. The irony is that I was hired for the role because the store owner saw my academic results and assumed that these would translate into sales ability. Run. Very, very wrong. Some people possess incredible gifts in specific areas, such as music, working with machines, visual arts, political leadership, poetry, or chess, without those abilities translating to other more general dimensions of intelligence. Even within an area such as writing, people's gifts are highly diverse. I can sometimes write good poetry, but it does not come anywhere near as naturally to me as fiction and essay. My aunt writes impeccable journalistic prose, but cannot write poetry or fiction at all. And among novelists, even among those of the same genre, no two writers are alike. Our gifts are as singular and unrepeatable as our fingerprints. People often discuss Einstein's IQ, which is sometimes put at 160. I don't know the basis for that figure, or if it is close to correct. If it is, it would mean that there are approximately 250,000 people alive today who are as smart as Einstein. But this is meaningless. Einstein's genius is not captured by IQ. Einstein was good at math, obviously, but not as good as many other physicists at the time or since. His genius lay in his profound physical intuition. He was able to see into the heart of scientific problems in a way that stunned his peers. The great mathematician David Hilbert, who incidentally taught my great-grandfather, Max Born, tried to get to the general theory of relativity before Einstein, but failed in spite of his considerably superior mathematical abilities. Einstein's vision trumped Hilbert's abstract reasoning. But apart from these criticisms, which are not novel, the cult of intelligence did great harm to me in my development as a person. Firstly, by constantly having my giftedness praised and emphasized, I came to think of talent as a measure of worth and to associate it with getting love and approval. Thus, I was always trying to show off my talent, even after I was no longer a child and nobody cared anymore. We talk about gifted children, but not gifted adults. Why? Because children are seen through the lens of pure potential, while adults are seen through the lens of their accomplishments. Proving to people that you are smart as an adult makes you a pain in the ass, not an object of wonder as it did when you were 6-year-old. Another consequence of this distorting emphasis on intelligence as an end in itself was that I became lazy. I coasted through everything. In my final year at high school, I completely tuned out of my mathematics class and did not a single minute of study all year. When I failed the October test, last signpost before the high school graduation exam, I decided I'd better do something. So I took out past exams and studied them for 2 weeks and ended up getting 90% on the final. But this idiotic study technique proved my undoing. I was admitted as a faculty scholar to university and proceeded once again to ignore mathematics all year until the end, when I figured I'd pull the same stunt. Only I took out the wrong exams, which I couldn't understand, dropped the whole thing, and flamed out so badly in the exams that my faculty scholar status was revoked. I look back on the opportunities and possibilities this lazy attitude cost me with considerable regret. Another consequence of the need to always be seen as brilliant was that it robbed me of many simple pleasures and experiences, because I didn't ever want to be seen as dumb or inept. Yet, we are all inept when we start learning something new, especially in areas we aren't naturally strong in. I never allowed myself the pleasure of being a goofy dumbass, muddling along with all the other schmucks. This is why some highly intelligent people become increasingly... They avoid activities that challenge parts of their brain that are less well developed. while their skills in their particular area of specialization grow ever more hypertrophied. We all know these types who lean on intellectual analysis in every situation. Regardless of whether or not it is the appropriate response, they win every argument and lose every war. The toxicity of IQ worship is particularly prevalent in tech bro culture. Remember Elon Musk presenting his son X? When he gave his son and his social media platform the same name to the media at the White House, immediately at pains to remark that he is a high IQ individual. You could almost hear how easy it would be for him to substitute the word value for IQ. I watched this and the gifted child within me cringed because I knew what poor X is in for. A life of constantly striving to impress, constantly worrying that people might find out he's not as smart as they think he is. Ashamed every time a classmate understands something more quickly than he does, or beats him at chess. A life of refusing to engage in activities at which he fears he might not immediately excel. And Musk will give him this message again and again through subtle or unsubtle signals of disappointment and pride. Your value has a number, and it's the same as your IQ. The fragile narcissism and hubris that this type of parenting tends to induce pervades Silicon Valley culture, where everybody is too smart to listen, where the wisdom embodied in centuries of literature and philosophy is dismissed as so much old hat, and sub-25-year-old lords and masters of the universe like Musk's Doge protege. Edward Big Balls Korestein blithely move fast and break things out of the sheer arrogant presumption that they're 150. These are the people who dream up utopias that horrify any emotionally healthy human being, who believe the most patently stupid things because their robot brains tell them it's logical, like Nick Bostrom, proving that we must all be living in a computer simulation, or my ex-Silicon Valley friend who told me that humans are literally just meat dolls with inputs and behavioral outputs and consciousness isn't real. If all of this is very autistic sounding, that's because it is. Silicon Valley and tech subculture more generally is full of neurodiverse people. But the issue isn't autism itself. It's that people with very spiky profiles. As my friend puts it, people with very strong gifts in some areas and major deficits in others are raised in a culture that encourages them to base their self-esteem on one very narrow dimension of human functioning at the cost of all others, exaggerating their existing lack of balance to an even more unhealthy degree. This leads to psychologically brittle people because rather than relying on a flexible and broad base of emotional and cognitive skills, they lean on a single dimension of intellect alone. This is Musk and Zuckerberg to a T. They are lopsided as fiddler crabs. They're hugely overdeveloped left hemispheres compensating for almost vestigial emotional or interpersonal awareness. This is not a personal problem. It's a cultural one. Fortunately for me, at some point I wised up. I won't say it wasn't painful, but at a certain point in my life, I found myself increasingly leaning into my weaknesses rather than my strengths. I didn't stop doing the things I was naturally good at, but more and more I took pleasure in the experience of being a beginner, a learner. I took swing dancing classes, learned to use power tools, took up gardening. I'll never be an ace at any of those things. I still don't understand why I'm a bad gardener after all this time of doing it, but I've deeply embraced the holistic philosophy of what it means to be human, a rich and multifaceted, brilliant and hopelessly stupid being. And I truly don't care anymore how dumb I look doing it.